As Patricia said, I'm Jodi Schneider. I'm a senior editor with Bloomberg in New York, and I will be tonight's moderator. Please put your questions in the chat, start thinking of them and submit them as you can. As Patricia noted, I was in Asia for more than 5 years before returning from Hong Kong at the start of this year. I was president of the Foreign Correspondents Club in Hong Kong for 2 terms before leaving. Yet, though things have deteriorated in Hong Kong significantly in terms of press freedom, I came back to the US voluntarily. I came back for career and family reasons. Our 3 panelists did not leave China voluntarily. They were pushed out of the mainland, either effectively expelled because their journalist visas weren't renewed, or because of direct pressure on them and their families. Tonight, we will be hearing their stories, and we will be talking about the implications for journalism and press freedom of the loss of such coverage directly from China. I'll briefly introduce our panelists and then get right into a conversation. Obviously, Zoom makes a conversation more difficult than if we were all at a bar somewhere, but because our panelists are around the globe, we wouldn't be able to do this in a bar. So I hope all of us will participate, and I hope you'll all join by asking questions. We'll start with Chris Buckley, who is joining us from Australia, who is a veteran and senior China correspondent for the New York Times, who covered the early stages of the pandemic from Wuhan, coverage that helped lead his publication to win a Pulitzer Prize for public service last week for its pandemic coverage, so congratulations. And then he was forced to leave China. We also have with us Yvonne Murray, a reporter for Irish public service broadcaster RTE, who left China this year with her husband, John Sudworth, who was pressured by Chinese authorities for his reporting for the BBC. She is now in Taiwan. We also have with us Gerry Shih of the Washington Post, who was among the wave of journalists expelled from China. His publication, the New York Times and Wall Street journalists, were expelled in 2020. He comes to us from Washington, D.C., where he is preparing for a new assignment in India. I'd like to start by asking each of the panelists to tell us their story about when and how they came to leave China. I'd like to start with Chris, who's in Australia. Chris, you were there in China during the pandemic when the world was changing. Tell us how you came to leave and what was going on in China at the time. I hope Chris can hear.
Sorry.
Yep, that's okay.
I'm muted now.
Yep,
so I was just saying, my experience is probably a little bit atypical in that I was in the middle of the pandemic reporting, and more complicated than that, I was in Wuhan at that point. I'd gone to Wuhan to report on the outbreak, and I hadn't expected to be stuck in the city for so long. And even at that point, while I was reporting in Wuhan, my visa situation had become complicated in that I'd been receiving a series of short-term visas. And the last one I received was for 1 month. So even at that point, my visa situation for China was looking shaky. And when I went to Wuhan, because I was still processing my most recent visa, I didn't even have my passport with me. So to make a very long story short, the Chinese Foreign Ministry informed me while I was in Wuhan that I would not be extended a new visa, and I was expected to leave the country after I left Wuhan and did my quarantine in Beijing. So after leaving Wuhan in April 8, I think it was, April 10, I spent a couple of weeks in quarantine in Beijing, had about 11 days to pack up everything from essentially 24 years in China, and then move back to Sydney. I did try to go back to Hong Kong as well, where I had a valid work visa. A similar story to cut things short. I was there for 1.5 months, but then it was then told I would not be extended a new visa.
And were any reasons given? Was there any, or even back channel, were you able to find out, or was it just you are no longer welcome here as a journalist?
Well, we can easily surmise some of the reasons given the unhappiness with reporting, not just in the Times, but in other publications in recent years. But I wasn't given explicit reason apart from my visa having expired and me being expected to leave the country.
And do you think that if you hadn't been in Wuhan, if all this hadn't happened, if you were you're just reporting from Beijing or someplace, that you might have stayed there? Or do you think this was sort of inevitable at some point?
Oh, there's a million possibilities, and I don't like to think about them too much. I think if I had been in Beijing, my chances would have been higher, at least.
Yeah.